My name is Chandrasekhar Bhatt. I'm a very young entrepreneur. I'm just 27 years old. I'm sure not much older than many of you are in this group with me. And I started my entrepreneurship journey right after college, after I completed my engineering in 2016 when I was 21. It's a very odd age for anybody to begin their entrepreneurial journey, get right into business without any sort of corporate experience as such. But I really felt that I had to take this plunge and and actually make a mark for myself, make a mark for our country, which required a recycling service so desperately. So as I was studying in my engineering days, I thankfully got an opportunity to travel to a lot of remote places across our country. Right from the southernmost point of our country till the north. I've been to so many places for various industrial visits and even just for leisure travel as well. And during these visits, I actually noticed that we have a very long way to go in terms of sustainability and waste management in our country, India. And even during my travel abroad, I was so sad to see that Indians have been branded as a very dirty nation by most other developed countries. For example, if you go to Singapore, the dirtiest part of Singapore is called Little India. And it actually hurt me a lot to kind of understand and know that we have that tagline associated with us. And I really felt that as a country, we should do what is necessary to become an awesome country to live in, a beautiful country to live in, right? And that is what inspired me to begin this journey in waste management. It's an area of work. It's an industry which people usually don't want to get into. Nobody likes to get their hand dirty. Everybody wants to have an awesome corporate life. Come out of college, get a great job. Most of them want to be software engineers now, work in AC rooms. Everything looks so cozy and awesome when you're having that sort of a perspective. But I really believe that only when you address problems that nobody is willing to address can you create a lot of value, can you create a lot of opportunity, and you can create a lot of employment in our country. So I'll quickly delve into a few basic aspects about waste management in India. Then I'll invite a few questions from your end, and maybe we can have a small conversation around that. Post which I can tell you what are the few things that we have done over the past 5 years, which are going to seriously impact and make a dent in this industry forever, right? So let me share my screen. Give me a second. Yes, is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes, sir.
Awesome, awesome. All right. So I'll give you a brief overview about Trashin, the company I'm running, and the kind of work we are doing. Okay. So I'll come to this slide later. But first, I would like to tell you about, as I said, what is the industry opportunity for waste management in India. So in India, every year we generate 65 million tons of waste. So these are numbers given by Pollution Control Board. And to be quite honest, these are not exact numbers. These numbers are usually at least a few years outdated. So by now, India must have crossed around 75 million tons of waste generated annually. This primarily consists of wet waste, which is the food waste that we discard, the biodegradables, and it also includes the recyclables, which is dry waste. We also have small categories of waste such as sanitary waste and biomedical waste, but the volumes comparatively are much lesser. So about 75 million tons of waste is the volume that we generate annually. And the entire revenue or the entire transactions that happen in this industry every year across the various segments. So I'll tell you more about the different segments, but overall, this industry is valued to be at around $14 billion here in India. Now, the reality of the fact, the situation is that only around 25 to 30% of the waste that we generate here in India is actually processed. More than 90% of this 30% is handled by the unorganized sector. So you must be familiar with the garbage collectors who come to our doorstep every day morning, the raddiwalas. So this is the unorganized and informal sector which manages this waste. And unfortunately, all of them put together only handle about 25 to 30% of the waste volumes that we generate. All the rest, around 75% of the waste that we generate is directly going into landfills. It is dumped in open landfills. Many of them look like hills right now. They're not even landfills anymore. And that's the sad state of affairs. Now, there are multiple reasons why we are not able to handle the waste that we have in our country. First and foremost, waste segregation in India is extremely minimal. If you look at annual waste segregation averages across the country, it's around 20 to 25%. That too, majority of the segregation that happens in our country is only a few metros which do this. So cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, Indore, Mangalore, and a few others contribute to the waste segregation. Whereas even in our capital, even in Delhi, the waste is not being segregated. Now, since the waste is not segregated, governments don't have any other option apart from directly taking it to landfills and dumping it. Now, this is the first tip of the iceberg that if we can solve as citizens, we will be able to contribute immensely to the sector. But even otherwise, even if we segregate our waste, do you really foresee waste management being something really, really efficient in our country? Well, no. And the reason is because the existing supply chain is broken. So the supply chain involves these categories, okay? So it begins from the waste generator, which is us. Now we have certain constraints about recycling. So one of them is the lack of awareness about waste segregation. Number two, we don't have a channel for recycling our waste. Even if we segregate, many citizens claim that the garbage collectors are going to mix it up again. So there is no real incentive for any citizen to segregate their waste. Now, this is where the problem really begins. Now, those who collect the waste, even these people, the unorganized sector, the informal workers, now they have really unhealthy working conditions. They lead very unpredictable livelihoods. It is estimated that a majority of them survive on less than the basic poverty line threshold, which is around $120. They sell a lot of commodities like paper and plastic, trying to earn some extra income, but there is no real transparency in the pricing. They don't know what the market prices are. And the sad state of affairs is that when they come to collect our newspapers or any other recyclables, we negotiate with them to give us extra money. So here on one hand, we are asking them to pay us more for the waste that we are handing them over. On the other hand, they don't even know how much they can sell it at. One day they could be selling it at 12 rupees. The other day, one fine day, it just could drop to 9 rupees. So there is no real predictability in their livelihoods. About 75% of the waste that they collect is non-recyclable. We are all familiar with newspapers, metals, and a few plastics that they buy at certain market prices, but majority of the dry waste and even the wet waste is not recyclable. There is nothing else that they can do apart from dumping it. So for that reason, the waste collector's livelihood right now is really in a bad shape. The scrap dealers who work with these waste collectors try to manipulate them most of the time. They don't pay fair market prices to the waste collectors, and they have their own set of problems. There is a lack of regulatory compliance for the scrap dealers, because of which in most cases, they usually employ underage workers, children less than 18 years of age. They have workers working in a darkness without giving them proper living conditions. They sell all the waste that they collect to a lot of middlemen, like traders, who manipulate them, who again try to make more money than they actually should. So there is a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of strongholding happening in the informal sector, because of which the waste collectors and the scrap dealers are not able to make decent livelihoods. Uh, on the other hand, the final recyclables that go to the recycler, even that is of, as I said, poor quality, because the segregation levels are not that great. Recyclers don't have proper supply frequency, as in they might require 1,000 metric tons every day, but one day they might get 500, the other day that they must be able to get 1,200. So there is no consistent frequency in terms of volumes that they are receiving. Also, they don't know where the waste is coming from. There is no traceability in the value chain at all. So a lot of traders, what they do is they buy recyclables from a lot of scrap dealers. They stock it up in their warehouses. They hoard it. This hoarding is very familiar term for all of you, I suppose. This happens in agriculture too, where a lot of traders hoard all the agricultural produce till the market prices go up, and then they sell it. So there are a lot of traders in this value chain also who try to stock up a lot of commodities for recycling, and only supply it to recyclers when the prices go up. As a result of which, the recyclers don't get good quality of raw material. There is inconsistent supply frequencies. There is no traceability across the value chain. They don't know whether, I'll tell you a real story. There are so many cement companies which we work with. They require plastic raw material for their industry. And the reality of the situation is that most of the waste that they assume they are collecting from India is actually imported waste. So traders sometimes import waste from other countries, claim that it is waste that they have collected from India, and then they deliver it to all these recyclers. So this whole value chain is unorganized, it's broken, and this is a real cause of concern. And what we realized in our early days, right after college, it took us about 6 months to understand, okay, this is a situation in the industry. And what we realized is that by fixing this broken supply chain for recycling, we will be able to eliminate the waste, the 70-75% of waste, around, if you want to put it in numbers, that's around 45 to 50 million tons of waste that we are dumping in landfills every year. I mean, I'm sure you all know about the problems of landfilling, the kind of terrible living conditions it creates for the villages that surround it, the water that it contaminates, the groundwater, the agricultural soil that it contaminates wherever landfills are present. So if we are able to fix this broken supply chain, we will be able to eliminate the waste from going into landfills and actually create better livelihoods for the waste collectors and the scrap dealers in this ecosystem. Now, we also try to understand what is the kind of recycling rates across the world. Okay. Now, I believe we also have a couple of friends here from Europe. One of my close friends who I just spoke to last week about this problem, Mr. Larry, is also on this call with us. So Germany is one country where they have almost 100% recycling rates. And when I say recycling, I'm using the word very loosely. Recycling can be of multiple types. You can have chemical recycling, physical recycling. You can also upcycle a lot of waste into new products. There is waste to energy, which is considered to be a very efficient way of managing waste and generating electricity. So while I'm speaking during this presentation, I'll be using the word recycling very loosely. It basically implies all these different end uses for waste. And what I'm considering as the worst case scenario is landfilling, which is the ideal option that we should all avoid. So Germany as a country has around 62-65% recycling rates and around 30-35% waste to energy rates. Almost 100% of their waste is managed properly. That is, I think, laying the benchmark for the rest of the world. Most countries in Europe come under this category where more than 90% of their waste is managed. I've heard of countries like Sweden where all their indoor heating systems are completely run by waste, which they convert to energy. Uh, Countries like USA are somewhere in between, where about 50% of their waste is managed, 50% is being landfilled. Now, the major constraint for a country like USA is the high cost of capital expenditure, as in it takes an exorbitant amount of money to set up factories in the US. Labor costs are extremely high, because of which setting up these recycling units, setting up waste to energy plants becomes a little economically not so feasible in a country like the US. They prefer exporting their waste to many other Eastern countries like Indonesia, China, Vietnam, and so on. China, on the other hand, has about 40-45% recycling rates. Not so much better compared to India. India, as I said, is around 25%. However, China did a strikingly surprising thing 2 years back. In 2017-18, they actually implemented this policy where they introduced banning of any import of waste into China. What China is currently focusing on is getting their 45% recycling rate as high as possible by focusing on domestic recycling. They were the leaders in waste imports earlier. Majority of the world's plastic was being sent to China for recycling, and that is the reason Chinese products are extremely cheap, because most of their products are made from recycled raw material. Now that China has banned imports and are focusing on domestic recycling, we can foresee their recycling rates growing significantly in the future. However, India has a long way to go.
Hello.
Hello, Chandrasekhar sir. Hello.
Hello.
Please wait for a while.
Hello, guys.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Did you miss what I just said? Where did you?
No, it's just that we just have a glitch or something. So you can just restart from where you have completed.
Sure. Okay. My screen is visible, right? Is my screen visible?
No, sir.
It's not visible.
No.
Is it visible now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Please continue.
Okay, can you please tell me which was the last point that you heard me speak, so that I can pick up from right there?
So you were talking about the China and India have a long way to go.
Correct. Right. So as I said, China banned imports 2.5 years back, focusing more on domestic imports. They were the largest importer across the world for plastics. One of the reasons why Chinese products are extremely cheap, because they used to use a lot of recycled plastic raw material in their products. And now China is really looking to increase recycling rates within their country after the ban has been implemented. But India, on the other hand, has got to do much to catch up. Even if you look at the global average right now, it's around 58-60% recycling is happening across the world. And India is still at around 25%. So we need to double our recycling rates to even get to a global average. And we need to increase it 4 times to hit the numbers that Europe is currently at. So that is the kind of global scenario that we are currently in. Now, we try to estimate what sort of market does recycling have in a country like India, right? So we have about 130 crore population. It's actually more than that now. I'm sure the new census results that the government will be announcing, we are soon to cross China, is what the rumors are. So about 40 crore households or 40 crore families stay in our country. And even if you assume that 5.5 crore families stay in urban households in the cities, and 20% of them are in the upper middle class, we can still kind of address a market of around $1 billion in a country like India. So what I'm trying to say is, if a private company is trying to get into waste management to solve the problem, I mean, we are all asking the government to do this, government to do that. but sometimes it's better to take things into your own hands and solve a problem rather than waiting for the governments to do anything. So assume a company wants to get into this space and wants to start a recycling operation across the country. And even if you're addressing 20% of urban households, which is 1.1 crore upper middle class urban households, and you charge them a basic fee of, let us say, 200 rupees per month, that itself, along with the commercial opportunity in recycling, minimum market size that a company can address in a country like India is around $1 billion. So it's a huge market, a market that nobody is getting into, a market that is desperate for some solution providers to come into. And you know, you guys at your age, I believe you are all between 15 to 18 years of age, right? Right. So at your age, if anybody finds a keen interest in sustainability, believe it or not, 2020 to 2030 is considered to be the decade of climate action. We recently had the COP26 global summit where all global leaders met and decided what they could do for the planet. So you're going to see a lot of action in this space over the next 10 years. And if you get into this field immediately now, after school, after college, this is when you can actually create considerable impact. And as I said, this is a huge market opportunity. There are so many businesses, there are so many entrepreneurs, so many livelihoods that can be created in this space. Right. So I will also share a few things with you, which I recently spoke about at my TEDx talk. So have you guys heard of the word cult? Do you know what a word cult means?
Yeah.
Yeah. So cults are basically authoritarian groups who try to influence their mindsets, right? So there might be some which are, the Ku Klux Klan in the US, and there are so many other cults that try to impose their mindsets on a group of people. And it's considered to be generally a very negative term, right? So a lot of religious leaders who try to create cults of their own by propagating a lot of ideas. But the honest reality of the fact is that cults are not always so negative. You can have positive cults too. So if you're really interested in fitness, fitness can be a cult. If you're interested in recycling, recycling can be a cult. So what we plan to do is create a recycling cult. And there are a few tactics which we can apply in a recycling cult that actually make it much more interesting for people to participate. So the first thing that you need to do as a part of a recycling cult is that you need to adhere to some boundaries. So may I take a poll here? Do I have an option to take a poll here?
Actually, no, sir. So you can just ask them to give their responses in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we have 44 participants here. So if all of you, if you could let me know how many of you segregate your waste and how many of you currently have a single stream of mixed waste that you're currently disposing. Can I get to know that? You can type your responses, yes, no, here in the chat. Maybe I can quickly go through that.
So we have to type yes for which option?
Yes, if you segregate your waste, you can type yes. If you do not segregate your waste, you can type no. I just want to understand what percentage of are segregating currently. Soha says that I am not audible. Okay, thank you, Soha. I will try to speak a little louder. These are surprising results. Wow. I think 80% broadly have said yes, that they segregate their waste.
Yes, sir. It's good to hear.
Okay, Triparna Chaudhary says that she's trying to. That's good. And it's a very honest response. I mean, it's not a very easy thing to do. I personally struggle with segregating sometimes, especially if I order some food and the food packaging has a leftover, curry in it. Sometimes I might not be able to clean it up properly, right? So these are the kind of genuine challenges that we actually face on a day-to-day basis. Ritu Panchal says no. Well, okay, so around 75% of us are segregating. That's very good news. I'm sure that we are amidst a very educated and a very knowledgeable audience here who knows the importance of segregation. We do segregate it at home, but while trying it out, I noticed everything gets messed up towards the end. Riddhi Basu says that. Okay, right. Right. So I'll tell you guys one interesting fact. We Indians have a very frugal mindset. I'm sure all of you hand over your newspapers for recycling to your neighborhood Radiwala, correct? You can continue with the chat. I think this is working out much better. I can understand what the vibe in the audience is. Yes, yes, yes. Everybody is saying yes. Yeah, there is no doubt about it. I'm sure we all are, happy to take that extra pocket money, right? I used to love doing this, right? As a child, this was one of my very keen interests. Every month, once in a month, I used to be looking out for my neighborhood Radiwala. And how do I, call him? Whenever he shouts on the street, I used to go call him, ask him to collect 10 kgs of newspaper, 10, 15 kilos of newspaper. Used to love that pocket money. Iman Chatterjee says yes, but not possible all the time. Well, that's very true. And we realized it, So as I spoke about the challenges of waste collectors earlier, one of their core challenges is that even they don't know how many customers they are going to get every day. So they'll be cycling all the time and they'll be shouting out, hailing on the street, hoping that somebody will invite them inside and hand over their collection, but they can't really predict, right? The same way for us, we don't know when they're going to arrive. And I used to love it. I mean, once in a month, when we had enough newspapers at home, I was looking forward to somebody on my weekends, especially on a Saturday or a Sunday, so that I could get some pocket money. And I used to love that. I mean, as a kid, this is one of my most fun moments that I remember. I used to get that for myself. My parents used to ask me to chalo, keep it. They never used to involve in that. So one more interesting statement. How many of you are married women in the audience? Do we have any married women here in the audience? No?
Hopefully no, sir. Actually, it's for schools and colleges students, basically. So
schools and colleges only. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, this one is specific for the ladies. Okay.
There is one.
Yes, there
I'm
is
married,
one.
sir.
Ayush, obviously no. Yeah. So, how many of you? I'm sure there are quite a few ladies here in the audience, but even the younger ones, you must be wearing saris, right? Or you must know that okay, your mom must be wearing sari most of the time. Is that true? Yeah, we all have our parents, our mom who wears a sari, right? Okay, there is one. Triparna's mom doesn't wear a sari. Okay. Now, the interesting fact is Indians cumulatively have got 5 billion saris in their wardrobes. And usually the saris that women buy for events, they can wear it maybe twice or thrice max. They wear it for one or two occasions. And then if they wear it the third time, that's like a big thing. And after that, it lies in their wardrobe forever as a memoir, as a memory, but they don't wear it. Yeah, Soha. So I mean, you should notice this at your home too, right? That your mom would have had stocked up so many saris. Indian women have stocked up 5 billion saris in their wardrobes, which are of no use, which are just lying there for years altogether. And nobody knows what to do with it. They don't know what to do with it. The recycling industry in India right now is not capable of managing textiles yet. We are very slow in terms of textile recycling. So textile recycling is a huge opportunity, which if anybody is interested, especially the girls in the audience, now this is an interesting segment that you can look into. So much to read about online. Just go Google it up. You can read about all the different recycling campaigns which others have in their countries. In India, we still don't have a textile recycling setup yet. There are a few factories in Gujarat, but they import textiles, especially from developing countries like UK, and they make mats and a lot of other small items, which then they sell for much lower prices here in India. Do you know one more fact? How many of you, I'm not sure whether the audience is all aware of it. There are a few, and we are a mixed crowd, right? We have a few from different religious sentiments too, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here. But the ones who are aware of it, I'm sure that the Hindus who go for pilgrimages sometimes shave their heads off. Are people aware of that? Yes. Exactly. So, no, I'll tell you, this shaving your hair off in a pilgrimage is one of the most lucrative recycling businesses globally. India is one of the largest suppliers of shaven hair to countries like Africa, where it is used in making wigs. So this is another interesting segment. And if you notice every single thing around you, like right on my table now, I've got a set of books here. I've got a few trophies. I've got my light. I've got a plastic cup. I've got my watch. Every single thing right here on my table has a very unique recycling ecosystem around it. And it all it requires is us to observe. All it requires us to ask questions. What happens with what? Okay, I'll tell you a few things, few interesting things that you can do with all materials. Now, the metals are the most common, easily recycled items since decades. So metals have been recycled since more than 100 years, 200 years. You will find images on the internet about, about people during World War collecting all the broken metals on the street, right? When there are bombings all around, you will find a lot of buildings destroyed. The broken metals during these world wars used to be collected in huge heaps. People used to transport it and recycle it, and this is like 100 years back. And metals are one of the most easily recycled things. People have a tendency, even now, in this modern technological age that we live in, there are still a lot of informal people who collect metals in small quantities, who melt them at their home, and once they melt it, they
Hello, Chandrasekhar sir.
Yeah, am I audible? Hello. Hi, Neha.
Yeah, you have been. Hello.
Yes, Neha.
Okay, so it's kind of there were some glitches, so there was some interruption. Could you just start from the thing?
Sure. I was just telling you about this is better, right?
Yeah. Now it's better.
Yeah. So I was just telling you about how in the world wars also we have had a culture of recycling metals. Uh, and I love to speak like this. I mean, no presentation. I just like to talk. And you guys, please feel free to comment anything. I'm looking out at the comments. So even during the world wars, people used to collect metals, recycle it. Even 100 years later, now there are poor people, there are informal workers who collect metals, who melt it in their frying pan at home, and the melted metal is made into solid blocks and sold for higher prices. So it's a very commonly recycled material. It's not at all challenging. The metal recycling industry is very solid. It's been operating since decades. Paper started being recycled somewhere in 1950s, 1960s. It was one of the most commonly manufactured, materials, paper back in those days. But what happened was, and this is the interesting irony of the situation, in 1960s and 70s, the waste paper that people were throwing out, people used to buy everything in paper bags and stuff, and the waste paper that was being thrown out, there was not enough recycling of paper happening. And people actually said, that paper, you got to destroy a lot of trees to manufacture paper. It consumes a lot of energy. So why don't we create a new material that can be used again and again, that we don't need to manufacture as much? And that is how plastic originated. I mean, can you believe it? Right now, these are the days where we all complain about plastic, saying that, plastic is depleting natural resources. We are not able to recycle it. It's all getting thrown on the street. What do we do about plastic? We need to go back to paper. But back in the 1960s and 1970s, paper and cloth bags were very, very popular, much more popular than plastic. Obviously, plastic was not even invented before the 1970s. And then one fine scientist came along and said, wow, okay, we are consuming a lot of energy in manufacturing paper and cloth bags. So why don't we invent a new material that can be used again and again? And that was plastic. Okay. And plastic in the beginning was such a bliss, right? People could reuse it again. It was much more stronger. It was durable. The energy that it took to manufacture plastic was much lesser than the energy it took to manufacture paper and cloth bags. And while everybody thought, until 1990s, everybody thought that, yes, they found a winner. They found an amazing material that nothing else could, match up to. Even now, when people are complaining about plastic, there are scientists out there working on modern materials, trying to figure out if there is anything that's replaceable, that can replace plastic. But, well, no, they haven't been able to find any. There are materials like, biodegradable plastic bags and things which people are talking about. But I'll tell you the real truth, the honest reality, the truth of the matter is that the biodegradable plastic bags are not even biodegradable. They are made out of a plastic called as PP, and it's called PP woven bags. That's the name of the commodity in the market. Well, everybody out there calls them cloth bags. It's white in color. It's a bit shiny. And that is what every shop now sells to you in, right? They give it to you in white bags. Do people recognize what I'm talking about? If you know what I'm talking about, the new cloth bag that you go to a supermarket and get your produce in, yeah, it's white in color. It's a bit shiny. It's much more stronger. It resembles a cloth bag. They actually tell you it's a cloth bag. Well, only a few of you seem to know it. Yeah, that's true. Yes. That's not even a cloth bag. That's actually a plastic bag. It's PP woven. But the whole industry is trying to brainwash and greenwash every individual out there, telling you that it's a cloth bag. It's not a cloth bag. I mean, the biodegradable plastic bags, which are openly called biodegradable plastic bags. Right. So, that even is biodegradable only under certain temperatures and pressures, right? So you need to put a biodegradable plastic bag at a certain temperature in a controlled environment. Only then it is biodegradable. So it's a tough situation out there. We need more people to participate in recycling. I just did a lot of this to kind of keep you engaged. Yes. So now I think I have a question from Soha. How do we start recycling, right? If I'm correct, is that the question, Soha? Exactly. So how do you start recycling? Point one, as I said, if you want to create a recycling cult, you need to follow the rules of the game. Every game has its rules. If you follow the rules, it becomes easy. Rule number one is segregate your waste. Okay. Rule number two is tell more people to do it. I'll tell you why you need to tell more people to do it. Hold on a second. There is this curve known as the innovation adoption life cycle. If you listen to that innovation adoption life cycle, got it. My screen is visible now?
Yes, sir.
Hold on. Yeah. So this is the innovation adoption life cycle, all right? So every new innovation that you have in the market, it has to go through this phase. So in the beginning, the yellow part, which is called the innovators, is like every new thing initially is done by only a few people. Everybody else will think that you're a fool to do it. Nobody will believe in you. And only a few innovators will do something. So right now, recycling is at this phase. So I'm sure that the few of you who actually said yes, they segregate their waste will actually come under this category, because less than 25% of our country currently segregates their waste, right? So what happens in this cycle is that once more and more innovators start doing segregation, start recycling, and when other people get to know about it, a whole new segment of people will start doing what you do. So everything in life happens this way. People will do something only when they know that somebody else is already doing it, right? So we humans have this bias, which is known as it's actually a herd mentality. It's a bias where we want to do what others are doing. We feel safe when that is the case. So early adopters will only do something when the innovators are doing it. So once we get some early adopters on board, now the curve is going to slightly start getting bigger, right? It's going to bulk up. And that is when the early majority will start begin doing something. So this yellow curve right now, which we are at, we need to get more and more people to join us till the early adopters and the early majority will join. And when the early majority will join in is when the whole population will begin doing it. Okay. So we are at the very early stage of the innovation adoption life cycle right now. And we need more people to join in phases so that this whole curve can grow like a hockey stick. It's called a hockey stick growth because it grows like this. And that is when recycling can actually become a countrywide phenomenon in our country, where everybody has to recycle. And if you don't recycle, assume now that you are at the top of the cycle, you're right here, you have covered the blue phase, now you're at the red phase, right? Now if somebody is not recycling, now that person will be considered as apart from the audience, right? Apart from the crowd, and people don't want to be left out. And when everybody is doing something, each and every person, even if he's not interested in recycling, will begin doing it just because of the social peer pressure. And that is how we can make recycling much more common in India. And this is a standard cycle that every technology uses, right? So 20 years back, only the innovators were using, computers. Then slowly in 1990s, the early adopters started joining in. And the whole early majority happened in 2010 to 2020, where, even in a country like India, at the beginning of 2010, only about 10 crore people were, having access to the internet, had access to smartphones and, all the modern technology. But by the end of 2020, the early majority had already joined in. In 2020, as per the latest numbers, more than half of India, around 750 million or around 75 crore Indians are already having smartphones, are already, chit-chatting on WhatsApp. I'll tell you this fact. Many of the waste workers, waste pickers that we currently work with, we right now work with 250 scrap dealers. Each of them on an average has 10 waste collectors. So right now on an average around 2000 waste pickers we work with. And all these people are on WhatsApp, are actually putting their statuses up. And I get to see so many statuses most of the time. My WhatsApp is always busy because my waste picker partners and all my scrap dealers are very busy on WhatsApp. So this is the case with any sort of technology. And in 2020 to 2030, I'm sure the whole country will be online, will be digitized. And that is what we want to do for this sector also. We want to digitize the businesses of all the waste collectors, the rack pickers. We want to bring them online. And we have built a lot of interesting tools and technologies for that to happen. I'm sure you will also find one interesting tool, which I'm going to talk to you now about, that you can start using, which is going to make it much more easier for you to recycle your waste. Now, it all depends on how you support us in making this happen, because recycling, as I said, it is not a one-way process. It's a two-way process, right? You as a person, you want to recycle, and the waste collector should be ready to collect it from you and get it recycled. So it's a two parties coming together, a buyer and a seller coming together to create a transaction. So when we have something like this happening, it's imperative that we as citizens create awareness amongst the waste collectors, bring them online, create some sort of a platform where we can do transactions with them. And that is how we can make this happen. Yeah, Neha, you're saying something?
No, sir, not me.
Yeah.
Before I get into the last bit of my presentation, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. I'll be happy to address any questions. We can have 2-3 questions now.
Yes, sir. They have written some questions in the chat box. You can just answer them.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Galaxy J2 Pro. Hi, may I know your name, please?
So my name is Shubhecha Kormokar.
Subhiksha.
Shubhecha. I'm a Bengali. So.
Okay. Hi. So you have asked the question, I'm trying to recycle my green waste to compost, but plastic wrap is a bigger problem. Yes. So the moment you have any plastic wrappers or any sort of plastic, any sort of dry waste mixed with your green waste or your biodegradable waste, the compost is going to be contaminated. You will not get good quality compost. Even if you prepare compost, you will not be able to use it properly, right? So yes, how do you recycle such materials? Okay. So plastic has two major categories. You have recyclables, like your water bottles, you have your shampoo bottles, you have your bucket, your chair, all the hard plastics, the milk packets also, bubble wrap, all these HDP, LDP, LLDP, everything is recyclable. But then you have some non-recyclable plastics. You have toffee wrappers, you have chips packets, you have plastic covers. What do you do with all this? A very good question. I'll tell you a little bit of a policy that Indian government has created. According to the Indian government, if any company manufactures non-recyclable plastic, they are responsible to collect it back and recycle it. Okay. However they do it, it's up to the company, but whichever company manufactures non-recyclable plastic is responsible to collect it back and find a way to dispose it in an efficient, environmentally friendly manner. So there are multiple ways to process this sort of raw material. Now, this policy which government has created is called extended producer responsibility, right? The producer is the manufacturer. This is the responsibility which the manufacturer, the producer has been given, and the government has extended it to them. So it's extended producer responsibility. Now, according to EPR, what these companies do is they have multiple end uses for this material. One of them is you can grind those materials and you can lay it on roads while making roads along with bitumen. So around 75 to 80% of bitumen will be added with around 10-15% of plastic wrappers, which are grinded in tiny, tiny crushed form. And then it is laid on roads. It actually makes the road much more stronger and more, it makes the road last longer. Now, the challenge in this is that India being a slightly corrupt nation, road contractors don't want to do this as much. Because if they start doing it, their roads will be proper for a longer duration. Omkar, you have a question? Please feel free to write it down here. So road contractors don't want to do it because the roads, if they last longer, the business that they do will reduce, right? So that is one great option which we are not able to implement successfully. The other option is a lot of cement companies. I think I mentioned it earlier. A lot of cement companies, while manufacturing cement, they require energy in their factories, in their cement kilns. Cement kilns are basically furnaces where they manufacture cement. So in their cement kilns, when they require energy, earlier they used to use coal. But now we all know that coal it's not a everlasting solution, right? We have, planet Earth has limited reserves of coal, which are also depleting very fast. So what cement companies they are doing is they've found a new innovative method. They've imported some good technology from some other countries like Australia, where these technologies are being brought into India now, where they're reducing the quantity of coal that they're using in their cement kilns, and they're adding some plastic to that coal. We did some studies where we found out that when you burn coal, the calorific value of coal is around 4,500 kilocalories per joule. Okay, that is the amount of energy, 4,500 kilocalories per joule, when you burn coal in a cement factory. But when you are using some good technologies to process plastic waste, you can actually generate around 8,000 to 8,500 kilocalories per joule. So around 2 times that of coal, double the energy you can generate through plastic. So coal companies have reduced the quantity of coal they are using. They are implementing and they are actually offsetting it with some quantity of plastic waste. And that is how together they are able to manage their cement factories. More than 140 cement factories, around 12 cement companies, 140 cement factories across the country have started using this technology since the past 5.5 years. The quantities that they are processing is actually increasing year on year. More than 100,000 metric tons of plastic waste currently in India is being managed through this way. And I'm specifically referring to non-recyclable multi-layered plastic waste. Now, these plastics like chips, wrappers, plastic covers, all of these are not easily recyclable because in most cases, they are multi-layered plastic. If a single layer of plastic is present, it can be easily recycled. When you have 2-3 layers of plastic which are fused, and one you are making a different type of plastic, now those multi-layered plastics cannot be recycled in the standard approach. That is why these cement companies are using these modern technologies. And this technology is actually called co-processing. Waste to energy is different. Waste to energy is not still very popular in India. That is where you're converting it into electricity directly and you're supplying electricity into people's homes. Or you can even, send heaters and stuff like that. But co-processing is what these cement companies are doing. I hope I have been able to answer your question regarding how to recycle toffee wrappers.
Yes, sir.
Debjyoti is asking, why do we have paper currencies? Please make plastic currency like Canada. Okay. Well, I'm so I'm not in any position to answer your question, Debjyoti. I think the government of India might have to take up this question. And yes, we do not make paper currency, to be quite honest. Yes, it is a different type of paper, but that paper is only specifically used in currency making and for nothing else. So, yeah, I mean, plastic currencies are very popular in many other countries. I'm not so sure why the government has chosen this current option. But thankfully, during demonetization, with loads and loads of paper currency, especially 500 rupee notes that were returned back to the government, thankfully, we were able to recycle all of that. And we have also contributed to a significant volume of recycling of that paper here in Karnataka. So yes, we were, glad to do that back in 2017 during demonetization. I'm not so sure if we had plastic currency, whether we would have been able to do that, whether that plastic would have been recyclable or not. But that paper currency back then during demonetization, we were able to recycle it. Triparna Chaudhary is saying, no, it is not paper. Well, yeah, you can research more about that. It's an interesting question. I mean, it's government policy at the end of it. Naina Singh, you said landfills. Nowadays, it looks like mountains is not getting properly landfilled. How do we get rid of improper landfills? Or are there any steps that can be taken to reduce such waste? Yes. Amazing question, Naina. I'm surprised you guys are coming up with all the questions that, only a smart thinker would. And you identified a very, very important problem statement about how we can improve the current situation of the landfills in our country. Okay, I didn't tell you this before, but when I studied my engineering, I actually did mining engineering. Okay, and mining engineering is all about recovering resources from the earth. In a way, it is a bit destructive to the environment, and one of the triggers why I chose to work in a more sustainable field. A similar technology, which is called biomining, is what is currently being used to improve the situation of landfills across our country. There are multiple state governments which have taken a strong leadership position. States like Kerala and Tamil Nadu in the south have significantly started doing a lot of biomining projects. I'm aware of Maharashtra doing this. I'm aware of West Bengal starting a few projects where biomining basically means that a company is given the contract to take the waste that is already at a landfill, put it through some machineries, remove any sort of recyclable or any sort of dry waste components that are stuck in that. And finally, the output, which is going to be fine soil or any sort of biodegradable matter, will then be taken back to the landfill. Okay. So there is this machinery known as a trommel. A trommel, I will show you what a trommel looks like. Give me a second. Meanwhile, if anybody would like to speak out something, yeah, you can unmute. I'm just sharing my screen once again.
Hi, sir. This is Omkar. I had raised my hand to ask a question on plastic being recycled in roads. So, what I had come across was in Kempegowda International Airport, that is Bangalore's airport, they had a campaign wherein people could put their plastic in a huge container they had kept outside the airport. So after that, I was extremely curious to know what the process and how it is done. So after doing a little bit of research on it, I got to know that by using plastic in roads, microplastic is generated when vehicles move on it, which is even more dangerous to the environment. Is it true?
May I know the source of this information, Omkar?
It is from a professor I know.
Yes, I mean, microplastics in general, there's a lot of conversation happening around it. But I'm not very keen on microplastics being generated from roads, which does not seem very likely possibility to me. But generally, plastics definitely over a longer duration of time do have microplastics generated, which is a cause of concern. But you must understand that we always need to weigh pros on and the cons of every approach and its varied impact before we decide if anything is good or not. So either you recycle plastic by, let us say, making roads, and it might generate a very small percentage of microplastic, or you don't recycle plastic, you put it in landfills where it generates microplastic, it contaminates soil, it contaminates groundwater, it creates methane emissions, which is multifold environmental damage. So yes, there are pros and cons to everything, and we might need to weigh the pros and cons contextually to understand whether something is proper or not.
So just a follow-up question, how is microplastic dangerous and what are its ill effects on the environment, sir?
So plastic basically is carcinogenic, and microplastics, because of its minute size, are easily transferable through air, through food, through water. And over the years, with, I think, as humans keep consuming different types of food or eat seafood or anything like that, there's a possibility that these carcinogens may enter the human system. It will definitely create an impact over decades. We might not be able to see the short-term impact, but yes, it is definitely a cause of concern.
Sorry to interrupt, Chandrasekhar sir, but we need to wrap up within 5 minutes. Then after that, we'll go for the main session.
Sure. Yeah, I was just sharing the screen. Basically, you can see what a trommel is. It's a cylinder which is inclined, which has got meshes around it. The meshes can be of different sizes. So I was speaking about how biomining is conducted, where now you put mixed waste, which is there at a landfill site for many, many years now. It has got a lot of dry waste components in it, which are not recyclable. The biodegradable materials like paper and cloth might have already got biodegraded to some extent. And then there is a lot of compost, or there's a lot of wet waste component, which still lies and remains in that mixed waste. You put mixed waste through one end, the cylinder will keep rotating super fast at a certain speed. You can decide how much mesh size you want to have to separate different items. So let us say you have a lot of rocks or boulders in the landfill. You might want to have a slightly larger mesh size to remove the smaller sized particles.
What other options can... Hello, Chandrasekhar sir. Hello.
Yes, we can move on then. We can move on to the main screen.
Okay. Okay, sir. So just stay for a bit, right?
Thank you so much, everyone. Nice talking to you all. I will look into addressing this question sometime.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you so much,
For
sir.
a while, we'll just move on to the next main session. So, yeah, you can
Nice
just stay
talking.
over there, process. Thank you.
EcoBricks Galaxy J2 Pro. EcoBricks, well, Eco bricks, awesome. If you make eco bricks from plastic bottles by filling it up with other plastics, if you find a way to make use of it at home by putting some decorations or anything, way to go. I think that's the right way to do it. Solve it yourself at home. Do something by yourself. That is awesome. And do check out the Trashin app on Play Store. Sure, you will find a lot of value in our app. We do conduct recycling collection drives. As of now, it's live in Bangalore, but we'll be launching in your city soon. So if you want to work with me, do drop us a message. You can reach out to Trashin on our website and send us an email. We'll get in touch with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, what to do now? Can we leave the meet?
Hello, is there anyone who's saying something?
Yeah, I was telling, can we leave or we have anything?
Right now we'll start our main session, so you can stay on your places. Okay.
Start what?
Sorry?
You will start what?
Main session.
Okay, sir.
Am I audible?
Can you text me, just send it to me the movie names? Because
We'll just move on to the main pages. Right now we are in our rooms, right? So we'll move on to the main pages.
just send it to me,
Okay,
I'll
so
share it
please
with them.
Everybody, now we have a small video that we would like to play. Thank you for being here with us at the presentation.
Electricity is something that is considered most important to survive in the competitive world today. Most of us spend our days in school, and I think I speak for all that most of us plan our schedule from daybreak. Stringent restriction on usage of electricity does not necessarily refer to restricted usage of electricity in lights and fans that costs us our efficiency at work in terms of time, but rather restricting its wastage, which is to say, rein in our bad habit of leaving the lights and fans running as we leave one room for the next. We can also restrict our usage of air conditioners and microwaves, instead opting for, say, coolers and food that is capable of being stored mostly at room temperature without decay, thus limiting the need to heat it up. But of course, we cannot function without our laptops and computers in the lockdown. But we can opt for indoor and outdoor games instead of video games and mobile games that demand an unsolicited usage of a few extra joules. Yes, energy is measured in joules, and that is all we think of while working out our physics and chemistry problems. But what about the environmental impact of these few extra joules? You see, energy in our current world is vastly dependent on thermal and coal-based power plants. The shift to solar and other renewable energy is still taking place. Of course, the government is facilitating the establishment of a more solar-based energy ecosystem by sponsoring solar lamps and regulating the investment in the renewable sector by those already engaged in the non-renewable ones. The usage of energy in a non-judicial fashion is causing the release of pollutants like carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, oxides of nitrogen and particulate matter. With such tiny particles floating in the atmosphere, the risk extends to those of size 2.5 micrometer. That is 2.5 into 10 to the power of -6 meters. And there is no way we can imagine the size. The smaller the size of the particulate matter, the deeper its reach into our lungs, and the denser the threat. The greenhouse gas effect is also emphasized in the process of indiscriminate use of electricity sourced from non-renewable sources. So, other than switching to LED lights, what can we do? Well, the easiest solution to imagine and the most critical one to actually implement is to achieve a shift into the renewable sector. Using solar lamps, fans, and choosing to use electricity generated by harnessing the wind, the tide, the molasses, and even the ionization that takes place in the salt water that can otherwise be difficult to use without treatment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to all of you for joining this session and especially the sirs for making these presentations. All of you run important organizations, and your time is very, very valuable. So thank you so much for taking all this time. As a wrap up, what we could do is just hear from all of you, all the speakers, of final comments, thoughts that you have that you would like to share with the entire group that is here with us today. And also, if there are some thoughts, comments from the participants, we could take a few thoughts, comments. I mean, you may have lots of questions. I'm not sure if we will have time for those questions, but some thoughts, comments are always welcome. So if you can just sort of go around the table with the speakers and your thoughts. Arjun bhai, do you want to go first? Right, my bad. So Piyush, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was very nice, very interactive session that I had. There were quite a few students who were extremely participative. So it's always great to be talking to a bunch of motivated young chaps, and I'm really looking forward to what we can do. It's a great initiative by Switch On to just spread more awareness about energy conservation. It's a great day wherein each of us can group together and just figure out how we can make our lives much more meaningful and much more sustainable. So thank you, Switch On, and I really thank all the participation from the students who joined in.
Great. It's always nice to reach out to and speak to all of these budding young minds. I mean, they know so much more than what we've often known. Chandrasekhar bhai, Mr. Chandrasekhar Bhatt, if you would like to come in and also share your thoughts with everyone, the entire group.
Thank you, Vinay. I mean, I'm so happy that I got to make it here today. Didn't realize how time flew by. I mean, I was really enjoying talking to the kids, and I was really surprised that I had to, get the conversation to a close so soon. I would really love to keep this conversation moving forward. There were quite a few questions which I was not able to address due to lack of time. So I really invite everybody here to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to me even after our workshop, and I'll be happy to address your questions. And the more young champions we have joining this mission, the better off we will all be.
Absolutely. I'm so kind of you to make yourself available even after the chat. We will, of course, hope to keep reaching out to you for more with the wealth of information that you have, and keep sharing back. Ajada, would you like to come in, share your thoughts?
Thank you, Vinita. Thank you, Switch-On team, for this opportunity. Earth and Work has always worked together as partner with your organization, and we really thank you for inviting us to be part of this. A lot of the schools that I saw, I've been interacted with Earth Day, and they commemorate Earth Day. So definitely, my first message is to ensure that all of you sitting there, do something for Earth Day on April 22nd next year to commemorate this day and expand on the environmental movement, because that's what is required right now to reach out to more people beyond us who are already having some level of awareness, to widen this outreach for environment and sustainability. And my last message would be, all of you do take one pledge, one action point, identify one action point with all the learnings that you have with the different sessions, one action point, and adopt that one action point to pursue it as more towards moving towards a low carbon lifestyle, adopting a more sustainable lifestyle. And trust me, it helps you, as I said, being more, adopting sustainability makes you more healthier and happier. And that's what it works. So to adopt these practices and keep doing more of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think it's always, thanks Ajada, and thanks for that message. It's always great to have one point to start with. And of course, there's a lot to follow. Mananda, if you would like to come in, share one of your messages with the entire group.
Thank you so much for organizing this. It was the first time I got to speak with so many young minds. As somebody mentioned, these are young champions who are going to be saving the world. You know, today, even in climate change conferences like COP26, the people who are deliberating on it are 50, 60-year-olds who will make promises on behalf of us, but it's us who are supposed to do the work and save our planet for these young champions. So I think, as I also said during our session, like, this is the closest you get to being a superhero. So from this point onwards, I think everyone should look into the renewable industry and how you can do your bit to save the environment and also make money at the same time. So that's the great part about being in this space. So that's my message to everyone. Keep at it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that message. Arjun Bhai, if you can hear me, I can see you back.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes. Yeah,
so, hi, Vinay.
Hi, Arjuna. One final message from you to the entire group.
A simple message: join the climate fight. We have 30 years to get to net zero. There are many interesting opportunities available. This is not only the most meaningful place to spend your time and build a career, but also the biggest wealth creation opportunity that you will ever have in your lifetime is to work on climate. This is not a fashion. It is not a fad. It is here to stay. Climate action is here to stay until we get to net zero over the next 30 years at least, and then beyond, to sustain and maintain our lifestyles. So very meaningful and impactful area with a lot of business opportunity for all of us. Great career opportunities, and of course, getting to work with people like Vinay and some of the speakers that you heard today. So I hope you all consider that as a serious career option, and dropped a little link to entertain ourselves with a little rap song that I made on the climate fight as well.
Oh, nice. It's good to know you've created a rap song on that. Fantastic. So thank you so much. And I think what we've tried to do in this session is we've had roughly about 10, we've invited about 10 students from different schools from Bengal, Jharkhand, and mostly they've been about 4 or 5. Some have had, of course, more. But the idea is to take this message that all of you have given to a larger group, to their schools, to their colleges, and it's extremely important, as all of you mentioned. I mean, this is we have to. There's an urgent need for all of us to. Take action around this. So thank you so much. And I think there is, some people have been asking if there are links to give feedback. We will surely be getting back to all of the participants with to collect feedback, to also see what you would like to see next and how would you like to participate in such programs and workshops. So we will surely be getting back. And it's a special day today. I mean, energy conservation, it's very, very close to my heart. I've, of course, worked in the energy sector for many years, but one thing that I truly believe in is that energy conservation, it can start with all of us in our homes and our schools. It's the lowest hanging fruit. There's no better way for us to consider being part of a climate warrior or taking part in the climate action than look at energy conservation. So if there is anyone questions or questions really, but any thoughts or comments, questions, I don't think we'll have the time. But any thoughts, comments? Otherwise, I'm sure you will. There will be opportunities to share some of that. But no, I'm seeing in the chat box, I'm seeing there has been, it's been a wonderful conversation. People are asking about feedback links. We'll surely get back to you with feedback links, but we can maybe have, if anyone wants to also unmute and share something, feel free to do that. Otherwise, we will do a quick round of photography session. I'll request everyone to switch on their cameras and then we can do a quick, that's the best we can do in a virtual setting. So I'll request everyone to switch on your cameras. And once we've done that, it'll be nice to just have a quick photo session as memory's sake. Right, all of you looking lovely. Yeah, it's great to see the messages and comments coming out that it's been a very interesting, meaningful presentation. There were nice presentations. That's all nice to hear from all of you. Thank you so much, and it's a great compliment to all our. So on the count of 5, free to ask, but on the count of 5, I'm going to start taking photographs. I'll move from screen to screen and take some photographs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll put your best smiles on. Lovely, all of you looking great. A few more photographs, and then I think we should be pretty much done. Fantastic. Just keep smiling. Put those. Keep wearing that smile. Yeah, all of you looking. It's lovely to see all of you. These beautiful faces. All of that smile. Just give. I think we should pretty much be done by now. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. It was. Thank you so much especially to all the students. Mostly, I think it's been schools and some college students, of course. Lovely interacting. I'm sure the speakers have had a lovely interaction with all of you. And thank you so much to all the speakers for taking out the time, making the time in the middle of the week or at the start of the week, Tuesday, to do this. Thank you so much, and tada, bye-bye to everyone. Thank you. Take care.